Money doesn't just come from one place. It drips, trickles, flows, and floods into our lives in different ways. Welcome to Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood, a podcast that explores the power of multiple income streams. We've got merch. That's right. Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood t-shirts are officially here, and they're as comfy as they are conversation starting. Grab yours at the link in our show notes. Today, we are super excited to have Eric with us. He is the founder of Ducktown Weekly, which is a publication that brings back the joy of the funny pages. It's super cool. This feels like my childhood. I'm loving this. So if you grew up and you always flipped straight to the comics in the newspaper, this episode is definitely for you. So welcome, Eric. We're so happy to have you.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
And
Yeah,
Tony, you found Eric, right? You're a big fan.
I'm a huge fan. I don't know, maybe a year ago, I actually was like combing the internet. I'm like, how come I can't find any just comics? Yeah. You could go buy a whole book of it. The newspaper, our local newspaper, is a shell of a newspaper at this point. And I go, I don't even want most of the stuff that's in it anyways, but I do want the funny pages. And I couldn't find it anywhere, but not one to give up. Or actually, probably the algorithm helped me out because it showed up in my feed that they knew I wanted this. And correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but you've been doing this for about 6 months?
6 months, exactly. Yeah, our first issue is in April. We hit issue number 26, a few weeks ago.
So why don't you tell everybody the story behind why you started this and how you decided what to put into it, and we can dig into a little bit about what actually consists of the paper.
Sure thing. Yeah. So the idea for this came about a year ago. My mom was visiting us here in Washington, D.C., and we take the Washington Post. So she was reading the paper and said, I may have to subscribe to the Washington Post because of the comics pages. The Washington Post has really great comics pages. Whereas she, like you said, she's in a town where her paper has gradually faded away to the point where I think they deliver twice a week now in paper, and then they have the online version. But it's not worth it for them to subscribe anymore. So she doesn't have the funny pages. She'll print out the crossword puzzle on her printer, but just doesn't read the comics. And so after that, I was trying to think of Christmas present for my mom, which is often hard. And I thought, oh, maybe there's something out there. Probably the same time you, Tony, were searching the internet. Maybe there's something out there where I can find just the comics pages and have them sent to her. And as you said, there isn't anything, or there wasn't anything at that point. So that's when the idea of putting this together started. And I pulled over it for a little bit and then eventually decided to launch.
So how does one go about creating a newspaper? Do you have a background in this? How do you find the comics? I'm
Yeah,
super curious about this.
I I don't have a background in newspapers. I don't have a background in the comics. I've been reading the comics all my life, which is like 50 years now. So I have that experience at least. But that was what made me realize that my work early on for somebody to do on their own was the content. The comics are syndicated, right? So that was the first step, really, was reaching out to the syndicates and trying to understand how expensive is it to pay them to be able to print the comics. And if your circulation is small, it's not that expensive, it turns out. And then printing, of course, is something that there are a number of folks who will do for you. The printing and mailing is something that I can outsource. It turns out that the software you need for print production is something that's readily available today. It's something that like 20 years ago even probably would have been a big hurdle to get over, but it's something I was able to figure out how to use. So really it's working with a lot of partners essentially to put together the package. And yeah, the decisions about what comics to cover, what kind of content to have, that was fun, right? That was really sitting down with a list of my favorites and talking to the kids and figuring out what I always enjoyed. It's been a
Yeah.
fun part.
That's
So okay,
cool.
so you pay for the comic based off of circulation. So as you have more success, it'll cost you more.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. I'll have to have quite a bit more success before it would cost me more.
Okay.
Yeah, circulation is in the low hundreds right now, and yeah, if I I guess if my circulation approaches that of like the Washington Post or something like that, I'll be in a different ballpark. But you can imagine that's something that's a fixed cost every month that I've got to cover, right? So it's early on as that my number of subscribers is still relatively low. It's hard to meet it, but the hope is like as subscribers grow, the cost will be defrayed a little better.
Hopefully there'll be a spike in subscriptions after this episode.
I'm
Mhm.
counting
Yeah,
on
and
that.
the
Counting
holidays,
on
like
that.
what a great gift. This is like an incredible, awesome gift for people.
Exactly. I'm really counting on that over the holidays, but we'll see how it goes.
So
So oh, go ahead, Melissa.
you have a lot of very well-known, I'm looking at your FAQs. So I need to get my copy, but you have a lot of like well-known comics. So are you syndicating those? Is that how that works? Okay.
Yeah, that's right. So I work with 4 different syndicates, both for the comics and for like puzzles and stuff. So the crossword puzzles and
And you get
some,
like the New York Times puzzle
it's the LA Times
or LA Times.
puzzle, which
Okay,
is yeah,
good.
which is syndicated by Tribune Syndicate, and yeah, they have it's really there are a couple that seem to have the vast majority of the known
Mhm.
comics, and then there are a few others, and so between those 4, that covers all my comic strips, and yeah, it's a menu you get to pick and choose if you're interested in.
That's cool. And then do you plan to, I know this is still in its early stages, but do you plan to continue with the syndicated comics, or do you have interest in opening this up for some like independent comic creators or
It's something I've thought about, and I've certainly been contacted by a number of independent comic creators, and actually there's one, The Poet, which
By Todd
added
Webb.
recently by Todd Webb,
Yeah.
exactly, which I really love. And he's one
Yeah.
of those independent creators who reached out to me. And I had a standard response to everybody. I said, it's really cool to be contacted by a bunch of creative people. But so I was responding to everyone and still have been saying, just getting started. We'll revisit our content at some point. But for now, I think we're set. But I really like that strip and it seemed to fit really well with the rest of the paper. I have added that.
that's cool. That is cool. I can imagine you'll probably get busier and busier with people pitching you absolute comic ideas, but that might not be a bad thing in the long run. So this is print. Do you want to stay in print, or are you looking to expand to some online platforms in the future? What does that look like for you?
That's it. It's an interesting question. I started out thinking, no, I just want to stay in print. That was the whole concept, right? Is that because actually, if you want to read comics, there are lots of online, there are lots of great options. The syndicates themselves have sites where you can read today's strip of Garfield or whatever strip you want. And then there are other really cool things that are done. Cool, like the oatmeal. I don't know if you're familiar with other web comic, but there are like some great web comics
Yes.
that are web only. And I wasn't really interested in competing with those spaces. The thing I've thought about is we also have some other content in there, right, about birds and national parks and stuff like that, that could be a blog on the website or something along those lines. And so far haven't really pursued it, but it's
So do you write any of that? So in every issue, there's like the opening, you have your little introduction of what's in the paper. And then I'm just gonna flip through. It's probably gonna make a bunch of noise here, and Melissa's gonna be mad when she's editing. But
That's
there's
okay.
a in the parks section, there's the welcome, there's the bird, there's the historical piece. It's an old
right.
article that's reprinted from like the early 1900s something. And then Poet's Corner, and then you always have a recipe in here. So where do those come from? How did you choose that stuff?
I write some of it. The initial concept, I want it to be like if you took something like if you took the comic section of a paper, the lifestyle section of a paper from each day of the week and stapled them together. And so the comics and the puzzles, but also a little bit of other content. So like some of the stuff like the recipes that's syndicated, I get that. The recipe from the same folks that I get the crossword puzzles from. But the bird of the week, the national park thing, I do those myself, which I really enjoy. I'm really into bird watching and stuff. So it's something that gives me an excuse to learn something new every week. The thing on the cover, right, the front page where I just give an overview of the paper. I write that as well. And then I go to other sources there's a poem every week, which is old enough to be no longer under copyright. A
Okay.
friend who calls it antique poetry. It's which I enjoy, and something from Shakespeare, the same thing. And then the newspaper is fun. Like I go to the Library of Congress, their Chronicling America project. Lots of newspapers have been scanned from going way back to the early 1800s and stuff. And the ones I take are from about 100, 120 years ago. And it's really fun to read these papers and see what people are interested in. And I try not to pick up the stuff about murders, which was very popular in all eras and stuff.
That would be
But
my interest.
okay, it's fun. Lots of heiresses being poisoned and things. Go back.
Thanks for the tip.
Maybe you need to peruse those, Melissa.
I know. I'm like,
come up with
thanks.
a new book or movie script or something.
Yeah, a whole different paper.
Yeah, that is so cool that you're curating this stuff. And so what's pretty awesome is so every year we try to get my daughter to a new national park. And so she's averaging more than one national park a year in her 13 years on this planet. So when I got this, I bought it literally just for the comics. And then I open it up and I'm like, I don't know if I'd ever done a crossword puzzle. Next thing you know, I'm doing a crossword puzzle. Then I'm trying to do these Scrabble words, thinking I'm doing great till I find out that I'm spelling the word wrong and those sorts of things. I love the national parks. And then some of your birds, you're like, you could see it in this national park. And then you get to learn about that national park. And I just love it, obviously. Enough to reach out to see if you'd come on the podcast.
Yeah. Really appreciate it. Yeah, the parks thing is fun. And yeah, my family really enjoys the national parks. And it's also, I hadn't heard of some of these parks. It is nice to discover there are 60 odd parks. So I'm going to have to decide at some point, do I start cycling back through them again, or do I move on to state parks or something else? But I'm really looking forward to having learned about every one of them.
That's a cool
and so then
angle.
if people, as far as the comics, you've got Pickles, which I don't know if I knew that one before, Red Rover, Daddy's Home, Classic Peanuts, Blondie. So there's some that people are going to recognize, maybe some new ones. So are the Peanuts, they're all older comics?
Yeah, that's right. Those are essentially reruns.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is something today I remember that being controversial when I was a kid, when they started like doing reruns of any comics. Now it seems to be much more accepted for strips that aren't being produced anymore.
That seems so silly because like reruns of TV shows that's a thing, right? A huge thing.
It was an innocent time back then.
It was too. It is. And it's funny. You go from, you'll read a Peanut strip and it is something blanket got stolen or something. And then the next one is, and actually I've shared some of these with people. It's one of my favorite. I can't remember which comic it was now. They were like, oh, do you use AI to help you with your homework? And he goes, yeah, I just asked it to help me come up with an excuse for why I didn't get it done last night. And just some very current, and these comic writers, a lot of them are like philosophers. It's really incredible what they come up with.
There's a real range, even within what I have. You can imagine I do have readers who are disappointed not to see their favorites. There's also a split between people who like the serials like Flash Gordon or The Phantom, Apartment 3G, things like this. I don't have any of those, and in part, honestly, it's because I didn't like them that much when I was a kid, and so I thought maybe this would work. But it'll be interesting. I haven't yet done a poll of my readers to see what the favorites are. I have decided I've tried to stay away from political stuff, both strips and like editorial cartoons and stuff. I think, like in part, the concept is not to be reminded what's going on in the world to some degree, or that part of the world people can get their news from other sources. But I'll give a plug to the Funny Times. I don't know if you're familiar with the Funny Times, but that's a paper. It's a monthly, it comes out 10 times a year, that has been published for 40 years now. That's much more focused on political cartoons and stuff like this. And they run Dave Barry and some other humor columns. But that's a different take, right? That's very much more like focused on a political view of the world. And
tonally, that's different than the brand that you're creating. Absolutely. Would you ever be interested in creating your own comic? Drawing, writing, any of that? Or is that not your thing?
I thought of it some. I was always fascinated by the New Yorker for a long time.
Mm.
And I think they may still have the caption contest where
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
print a
pretty sure they do.
cartoon and then you make up your own caption, which I always thought was fun to try and noodle around with. And then I did on the paper, like the kind of mascot of the paper, this kind of duck reading a newspaper that's on the front. Like I drew that myself, but I don't think I have what it takes to draw a comic.
I think you're selling yourself short.
I don't know.
Have you back on in a year and you'll be like, look, I drew this whole thing myself.
So you obviously doesn't sound like you're living off of this at this point. What's your background other than starting newspapers?
Yeah, I'm an economist. I've been like a salaried employee my whole career. So started out as a professor teaching at Washington University in St. Louis. And then I've worked for government agencies as an economist for a while. I'm at a sort of a quasi-government agency now. So yeah, I have a salary that's paying the bills, and I'm trying to get this project off the ground. It's more and more like working two jobs, but it's been a lot of fun. It gives me a lot of joy.
So is the graph moving in the right direction on subscriptions? Other people, new people are discovering you, and
Yeah, absolutely, it's absolutely going in the right direction. Not as quickly as my forecasting would have said before I started, but we'll see how Christmas season goes because I think I think this is a product that's well suited for that, and also getting the word out is the challenge, right? I started out just mailing direct mail copies to pre-copies to people, which is an expensive way to try and generate knowledge about the product. Facebook's been a pretty good way to get the word out, but I'm not sure how much
it
that's
doesn't.
gonna end up.
It doesn't seem like you have an Instagram page yet or anything for it. Is that
No,
true?
that's true. Yeah, no, that's true. I don't have an Instagram page. That's probably something I should focus on.
Tony, how did you find it?
I think the algorithm. I don't even know. I can't.
But that means that there must be some good search engine optimization.
Yeah, I think there is some good search. Yeah, I think the targeted ads. Obviously, it found me, and I think I subscribed within about a minute of seeing the ad.
So you are running ads then, Eric?
I'm running ads on Facebook, and they'll place ads on Instagram and other platforms. Most Facebook itself seems to be the main, and honestly, like the demographic that's most interested is like in the 65 and over age group, which is probably more Facebook and less TikTok or anything like that.
Except Tony, you're outlier.
I guess I'm an outlier. It's funny because my wife tells me that she thinks I act like I'm 10, but apparently maybe I'm acting like I'm in my 60s sometimes.
Maybe it's like the kid inside. This is a multi-generational product that can reach.
It is amazing to me how relaxing it is to pick up this paper and so when it comes, it's 16 pages and you get the days of the week. It all comes in one packet all week, but it has Monday and you've got a couple pages and then you've got Tuesday and it goes all the way through. And then Sunday I think Sunday's 3 pages or something. And it's great. And I'm not necessarily reading it like that. But what's been awesome is I've been watching playoff baseball lately. The Mariners, all of our hearts out here in Washington, got our hearts broken. We were so close to our first World Series visit.
So close.
But baseball is one of those games where an inning happens and then the commercials come on. And I've been reading comics during the commercial, and I just can't believe what a relaxing way to spend an evening that is, to watch baseball and read comics.
There's something to print that it's relaxing in a way that the phone will never be, a computer. And there's also something that I've forgotten from being young was like looking forward to the mail. Like coming in the mail and you're being happy that it arrived. That doesn't happen that often these days. But I remember when I was a kid, like waiting for to go check the mailbox, checking it. Nothing wasn't there yet. Went back later to check it. Those sorts of things. And I do know like people who have expressed that, oh, it's so nice to have something to look forward to in the mail.
It's true because nowadays we don't really get any fun mail. There's like nothing
Right.
that where everything is paperless for the most part. And then the stuff that isn't paperless as should be.
No, it comes from like the IRS or
Right. You're like,
the doctor's office saying you forgot to pay your bill or
I
whatever.
get that USPS, US Postal Service does like the mail preview email, and I get that every day. I don't know why, but it was like set up from when they were holding our mail at one point. So it just still comes, and it's just every day I open it. I'm like, oh, I don't want that. I don't want it.
Well,
Keep it.
but
But yeah, that's
there's-
great to look forward to it.
yeah. Yeah.
So
I
I
want
wanna-
to send somebody a postcard. They'll be
Yeah.
thrilled to get it nowadays. It's such a
Yeah, that's actually a cute marketing like strategy if you think about it. You were saying to direct mail the comics is quite expensive. But what if you're direct mailing just a postcard with the comic on a little comic on one side and then you just talk about miss getting fun mail as like the headline, the hook,
Right.
and then that could be fun.
Yeah, and this is a financial podcast. I'm going to talk about what this costs. If you do it month to month, it's a little bit over $4 an issue. And if you, what's the math on this? It's $189 if you do a 52-week subscription. And so I don't know what that brings it down to, but less than that. And
a
so,
little bit less
you know,
than more, yeah.
yeah, so it's a few bucks a week. And I can tell you, if you actually try to work through these crossword puzzles, you're going to definitely get your money's worth just on the time there. But it just is such a, and then there's a few other, I think there's a Sudoku in here and a few other Boggle and stuff. And I don't know, I think the value of what you're sending out and then just that tangible thing. And when you set it down and maybe your kid picks it up and accidentally reads something instead of staring at their phone, and you can stick it in your briefcase if anybody has briefcases anymore or whatever. You can look very professional carried around your newspaper, even though it's just the funny pages.
Yeah, I think the pricing has been an interesting thing. I think there are people who feel like it's pretty expensive. I get those comments on the Facebook page and whatnot. And newspapers historically have been more advertising supported, and people are used to thinking of the newspaper as being something that's not as expensive. And now, as their newspapers are struggling everywhere, they're getting more expensive, and people are dropping them and whatnot. Whereas in environments where people are like, some people who subscribe to the paper are really into comic books, and here the paper costs what a comic book would cost, right? Like to somebody who's a comic book fan, this doesn't seem expensive, but to somebody who grew up reading a newspaper and thinks of it as something they used to put a quarter in a machine to get or whatnot, it seems expensive. It's been an interesting thing to think about. The economics require it to be in this range, and I'm hoping people will see it your way.
And I think that is a good point that I haven't mentioned yet. There are no ads. It's literally just content. And whether it's the games, the other pieces, or the comics themselves, you're not just getting a bunch of advertisements in the mail, which, you know, now you can't go anywhere with getting an advertisement in your face. So you can actually check out and just engage in what you want to engage with. Yeah, my brother is a giant comic book fan. And yeah, you look at what a comic book costs, it's expensive. And rightfully, it's a lot of work to, one, create the comics, but two, it's actually printed. There's a lot of hands that have to touch this thing to get it to your doorstep.
Yeah, that's right. And as we move away from the daily newspaper, I think this is what print may look like.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really neat that I hope that your success continues mainly from a selfish standpoint so that I can keep getting this. If you're taking your poll, my favorite comics that I want you to keep in there, Melissa is covering her face right now. Speed Bump, which I didn't even know how much I liked it, but Speed Bump is great. And I've always liked Zits. I have a book of Zits from back in the day. And yeah, getting the Zits is great. And I was a Garfield comic book collector as a kid. So it's really fun. It's just super fun.
I'm glad to hear. Zits is really popular, and that's something I discovered with the Washington Post. I'm glad to hear you like Speed Bump, because I think a lot of people aren't familiar with it. But I really love it. I think it fits in really well with the paper.
Some of the Speed Bump are like laugh out loud funny. They really are.
Right,
Yeah, they're
right.
really great.
Hard to do with it. Like it's not a character-based comic
Yeah,
at all, right? It's more like The Far Side or something
yeah,
like that.
exactly.
Everyone is a gag. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to
Yeah,
get
well,
my
I'm glad
free
it caught you
copy.
so early on in this side hustle, and I'm really excited to see where this goes. I think the world would be a better place if this was on more people's coffee tables.
Well, thank you. I would agree with.
Everybody needs a smile. And even better, because I have the website open, you can request a free copy,
And
which
you
is
can
pretty
request a free
amazing.
copy.
Yeah, there's no reason that everybody shouldn't at least give it a try.
Yeah, my
No
first
risk.
copy. Yep, my first copy was a free copy, and I couldn't believe it existed.
Yeah, this was my theory was you can't find it on the newsstands, at least not yet. People are unlikely to subscribe to something if they've never seen a copy at all. So yeah, the free copy I think is important.
So is that a
Mhm.
potential path for you to have it on newsstands so someone could just walk by and pick it up, and it could be in bookstores and stuff?
Yeah, that's a potential path. I made some attempts to pitch comic book shops and independent bookstores on carrying it, but haven't been able to invest in too much time in that. That's been something I've discovered working a full-time job and doing this. Like I have enough time during the week to do the production every week, get the paper ready, work with the printer, make sure the subscribers are set. But like the extra stuff, oh, how do I like go talk up comic book shops? Finding those hours has been tougher.
So being an economist doesn't afford you a ton of free time to pitch bookstores.
Oh,
Yes,
I have
fair,
a 40-hour week. It's a 40
fair.
hour week. Yeah, a solid 40 hours.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it's a solid 40 hours, if not more. So that's pretty impressive that you've been able to do what you've done. And I would think that there are probably even a lot of other places that would eventually, as you scale, enjoy this. Like thinking of that age demographic, like coffee shops, diners, places that like these folks are frequenting more often where they would want their like weekly read.
Or orthopedic surgeons?
Yeah, for the free copies, yeah, because they keep, if you think about any doctor's office, they keep magazines from, you'll go in, it's like from 2013, like really
Thanks.
old stuff. So you could drop like one copy and it'll just live in the waiting room.
And you have a captive audience. That's right.
Uh-huh. Yes. So there we go. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us. We had a blast learning more about you, your business, your comic. Everyone listening must request a free copy. This is very important. We need to support Eric and his vision. And also, this just sounds so fun. I'm going to request mine right after this as well. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review on any of your favorite podcast platforms. And with that said, we'll see you next time on Drip Trickle Flow Flood. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks very much. This has been so fun.